What is ADHD? How many students with ADHD are currently being served in the U.S.? And before I get into that question, I'm going to go ahead and define what ADHD is and what it stands for. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and its definition is a chronic condition marked by the persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and sometimes impulsivity. In 2014, they were able to gather information that stated that there was approximately 6.4 million children that had been diagnosed with ADHD, and the children ranged between the ages of 4 to 17. How has the number of students identified increased in recent years? In Between 2003 and 2011, there was a 42% increase in the number of children diagnosed with ADHD. And the children that were assessed were between the ages of 4 to 17. And in this diagram, we can see that the males have the highest diagnosis of ADHD. How has the number of students identified increased in the recent years? And in this one, I continued with that same question, and I used this diagram right here. And for the 2015-2016 year, there was a 10.2% of children diagnosed, and the highest was for the children that were between the ages of 12 and 17. What are some of the reported reasons for that increase? And I was able to find some information on this question. The biggest one that I found was that healthcare is available to more of the community, more of the people, and so they're able to get resources to be able to be diagnosed with ADHD. It is also a little bit more affordable now for a lot of people. We are also more knowledgeable of what ADHD, how it's diagnosed, their characteristics, their symptoms, and many of us have a better understanding of what it is, and we can also see it in many of the students. So teachers are able to apply that knowledge that they have of ADHD to their classroom, and then they're able to see if a student has ADHD or not, and if they do, she can refer them to the school psychologist, and it can get taken, the parents can get involved, and they can be diagnosed to receive the appropriate education that they need, such as like modifications. And there's also less stigma. People are not judged as much as before. There's a lot of people who are being diagnosed with various disabilities, but there's nothing, like there's no strings attached to it. You're not going to be made fun of or judged. Well, you're going to be less likely to have that happen to you. People are not as concerned with what the labels are anymore. What are the specific behaviors, characteristics of students with ADHD? There are two behaviors that I can think of: externalizing behaviors and internalizing behaviors. So for externalizing behaviors, those are the characteristics that students give out, physically give out, that you can notice. So the first one is acting out. So when students act out during the classroom by blurting out or talking when they're not supposed to be talking. There's also hyperactivity. They're energetic, they're full of energy, they want to be out and about, walking in the classroom. There's a lack of focus. They're probably distracted by their peers, and so they will not be paying attention to what is being said. And there's physical aggressions. That is physical aggressions like hurting other students, tossing materials around, kicking things like that. Then we have internalizing behaviors, which are the students that are a bit more quiet, shy, they're withdrawn, they keep to themselves, and these students typically have low self-esteem, and they're usually daydreaming, or they're not paying attention to class because they're focused on something else. In what ways do those characteristics make it difficult for students to learn and participate in school? There are three aspects that these characteristics affect in a student's life, and that is the academic, social, and emotional skills that they have. So students that have ADHD have difficulty focusing in class. That means that they're not taking in what the teacher is teaching. They're not learning the material or the processes of the certain topics or materials, subjects that are being taught in the classroom. And if they're not focused and they're not learning, then they're not prepared to move on to the next content or the next topic. There's also the social aspect to this. Children that have ADHD have usually a difficult time making friends, socializing with them, which leads to communication problems. So if a student has few friends or barely any friends, then they're not using their communication skills to talk to them about what they're doing or what's going on with them. And if they don't have that communication, it'll just get harder as they get older in school because there's a lot of group activities or projects, and not just that, but in general having to talk to other people, whether it's peers, whether it's teachers, adults, family. They have to be able to have those communication skills. Then we have emotional, where the student can be happy during 1 second and then sad the next, for no reason, for no cause. So all those things affect the student's life in school. Do all students with ADHD demonstrate the same characteristics or degree of behavior? And there are 3 types of ADHD. There is the predominantly inattentive, the predominantly hyperactive, impulsive, and a combination of both. The predominantly inattentive type of ADHD is where the students don't pay attention to what the details are, and so sometimes they'll be making mistakes. There's the academics. They don't pay attention in class. They don't take care of their grades. They don't care for their grades. Then we have when the teacher is teaching, or she's trying to tell you something, or somebody else is trying to tell you something, they're not paying attention because they're distracted. And if they're not paying attention, they're not following the directions. And so they will be asking the teacher, what did you say? Or what was that? Or what do I do next? So they're out of the loop. They don't know what's going on most of the time. They're also not disruptive. So they don't cause problems, and they're often overlooked. So they fly under the radar. We don't really notice them because we're not paying attention to that behavior. We're paying attention more to the behavior that is causing an outburst or disruption in the classroom. And sometimes these students also have anxiety or mood disorders. In the predominantly hyperactive impulsive, the hyperactive is a great reminder of what this type of ADHD is, which is where students can't stay still, and their hands are moving and fidgeting, or their feet are tapping, and they can't be seated for long periods of time. They're also full of energy. They want to be out and about, running around, touching things, climbing things, and that distracts the other students from trying to learn. They're also disrupted by talking or blurting out answers when they haven't been called on, or they're not ready for the answers, and they're always not always, but sometimes interrupting others, like the teacher when she's talking, friends when they're trying to have a conversation. And then we have the 3rd type of ADHD, which is a combination of both predominantly inattentive and predominantly hyperactive impulsive, and it shares characteristics from each of the previous 2 types of ADHD. According to IDEA in 2004, under what category are students with ADHD identified? And ADHD does not have its own category. It falls under other health impairments, so that is why there's probably not that much information about it, of the numbers or correct representation of how many students have ADHD. Discuss effective class-wide interventions for all the students, especially for those who display characteristics of ADHD. And a lot of these modifications or interventions for students with ADHD benefit the rest of the class as well. The first one is organizational skills. It is important to have a classroom that is very well organized, that has the materials labeled and things labeled where they're supposed to be. That way the students are not confused as to where they need to get the scissors, or where they need to put their backpack, or where they need to turn in their homework. And it's also a good skill for them to develop. That way they can keep their own space organized and neat and know where everything is, and won't have to rummage through their binder or their backpack trying to find things. There's also giving them extended time and breaks. If you're giving a lecture or trying to teach something and you're talking constantly and you're doing this for a long period of time, the student is probably really tired and bored and has already lost interest in this. So it's important to keep it, energetic, keep it interesting, and sometimes just giving a break, whether it's a stretching break, just walk one lap around the classroom, or go give 5 people a high five or something like that. Keep them engaged. Seating arrangement is also something that's important. You want to have your seats, have a seating arrangement for your students. That way there's no fighting over a certain spot because you want to sit with this friend or you want to sit with that friend. Seating arrangements are important, not just because of that, but for students who have nearsighted vision and need to be closer to the board, or students that need to have a little bit more space from others in order to be able to concentrate in the classroom. There's also the classroom furniture arrangements, making sure you have space to walk through the tables, or there's enough space to go by the door, and that there's not a lot of things tight together, that it's a cluster and you can't get around the classroom. And then instructional strategies are very important. You have to have at least more than one way to teach besides verbal. You have to have visuals and physical ways to teach students that can help them become more engaged with what is going on with the lecture or the topic or subject. And then setting goals is also important. Setting goals is important for students because if they set it personally and have a personal connection to that goal, they're more likely to work towards it and take steps to get to that goal that they have established. And that is not just something they can use in school, it's something they can do in life, whether it's, oh, I hope I can beat this level at this game this weekend, or I hope I can read 20 minutes each day. Or when you're an adult, you can be like, my goal is to wake up at 7 in the morning so I can get this, this, and this done. So it's something that the students can work on and develop and use as they're growing up. And here is a list of the references that I use for this research. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.